What if I told you that the very act of looking at something changes it? Not because you touch it, not because you disturb it, but because consciousness itself has the power to alter physical reality. This isn't philosophy, this isn't mysticism, this is quantum mechanics, and it's the most disturbing discovery in the history of science. My name is Albert Einstein, and what I'm about to share with you will shatter everything you believe about the nature of reality. In 1905, I thought I understood the universe, space, time, matter, energy, all following predictable laws. But then quantum mechanics emerged, and with it came a revelation so unsettling that I spent the rest of my life trying to prove it wrong. I failed, and today you'll understand why. The story begins with a simple question that destroyed classical physics. What happens when you're not looking? Picture this. You're alone in your room. You close your eyes. What color is the wall behind you? You think you know. It was blue when you last looked. But here's what quantum mechanics tells us. When no one is observing that wall, it doesn't have a definite color. It exists in what we call a superposition, simultaneously blue, red, green, and every other color until someone looks at it. Your mind rebels against this idea. Of course the wall has a color whether you look or not. This is common sense. This is how reality should work. But should doesn't matter in quantum mechanics. Only what happens matters, and what happens is impossible. Let me take you back to 1909, to a basement laboratory where Thomas Young performed an experiment that would haunt physics forever. He called it the double-slit experiment. Young fired light through two parallel slits and watched the pattern it made on a screen behind them. What he saw changed everything. The light didn't behave like particles, it behaved like waves. When waves pass through two openings, they interfere with each other. Where wave peaks meet, you get bright spots. Where peaks meet troughs, you get darkness. The screen showed stripe, bright, dark, the unmistakable signature of wave interference. This seemed to settle it. Light was a wave, case closed, except it wasn't. Fast forward to the early 1900s. Scientists discovered they could turn down the intensity of light until only one photon at a time passed through the apparatus. One single particle of light. Common sense says this photon must go through either slit 1 or slit 2. It's a particle. It can't split in half. It can't go through both slits simultaneously. But when they ran this experiment, something impossible happened. Even with one photon at a time, the interference pattern still appeared. Bright and dark stripes just like before. How can one photon interfere with itself? How can it go through both slits at once? The answer quantum mechanics gives us is disturbing. The photon doesn't go through slit 1 or slit 2. It goes through both simultaneously. It exists in a superposition of all possible paths until something forces it to choose. And that something is observation. Here's where your role becomes terrifying. Scientists decided to solve the mystery by watching which slit the photon actually used. They placed detectors at each slit to monitor the photon's path. The moment they did this, the very moment they tried to observe which slit the photon chose, the interference pattern vanished. The photon, knowing it was being watched, suddenly started behaving like a classical particle. It went through one slit or the other, never both. The wave-like behavior disappeared completely. The act of observation changed the fundamental nature of reality. Let me be absolutely clear about what this means. It's not that the detector physically bumped the photon. It's not that the measurement apparatus disturbed the system. The change happened the instant information about the photon's path became available, even if no human ever looked at that information. In 1982, Alain Aspect performed the most precise version of this experiment ever conducted. He used quantum entangled photon particles so deeply connected that measuring one instantly affects the other, regardless of the distance between them. When he measured the polarization of one photon, its partner on the other side of the laboratory instantly knew what had happened and changed its behavior accordingly. Einstein hated it. He called it spooky action at a distance and spent decades trying to prove it impossible. He believed in local realism, the idea that objects have definite properties independent of observation, and that nothing can influence anything else faster than light can travel between them. Quantum mechanics violated both principles. In 1935, I proposed a thought experiment with my colleagues Podolsky and Rosen. We imagine measuring one property of a quantum particle, which would instantly determine a corresponding property of its entangled partner. If quantum mechanics was correct, this measurement would somehow affect the distant particle instantaneously. We thought this was so absurd that quantum mechanics must be incomplete. We were wrong. 50 years later, Aspect's experiments confirmed that quantum entanglement is real. The universe really is this strange. Observation doesn't just reveal reality, it creates it. But here's what truly disturbs me. We still don't know what qualifies as an observation. Does it require a conscious mind, a measuring device, any interaction whatsoever? This question has spawned the most unsettling interpretations in physics. The Copenhagen interpretation, championed by Niels Bohr, says that quantum systems don't have definite properties until measured. Before measurement, they exist in superposition, all possibilities simultaneous. The wave function, a mathematical description of these possibilities, collapses upon observation, forcing reality to choose one outcome. But this raises a nightmarish question. At what point does collapse occur? When the photon hits the detector? When the detector sends a signal to a computer? When a scientist reads the computer screen? When they tell a colleague about the result? Where does the quantum world end and the classical world begin? This is called the measurement problem, and it has no agreed-upon solution. Some interpretations are more disturbing than others. Hugh Everett III proposed the many worlds interpretation in 1957. According to Everett, wave function collapse never actually happened. Instead, every quantum measurement splits the universe into multiple parallel realities. In one universe, the photon went through slit 1. In another, it went through slit 2. Both outcomes occur, but in separate, non-interacting branches of reality. This means that every quantum event, and there are trillions happening every second, creates countless new universes. Right now, as you're reading this, versions of you in parallel universes are living through every possible variation of this moment. In some universes, you decided not to watch this video. In others, you're a completely different person because quantum events in your brain unfolded differently. The implications are staggering. If Everett is correct, consciousness doesn't collapse wave functions, it splits them. Your awareness doesn't create one reality, it selects which branch of an infinite multiverse you experience. Every choice you think you make has already been made in every possible way across countless parallel worlds. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff proposed an even more radical idea. Consciousness itself is a quantum phenomenon. They suggest that microtubules in brain cells maintain quantum coherence, allowing consciousness to exist in superposition until it collapses into a specific thought or decision. In this view, free will is literally the collapse of quantum possibilities in your mind. But perhaps the most unsettling interpretation comes from physicist John Wheeler, who proposed the participatory universe. Wheeler suggested that consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it retroactively creates the past. His delayed choice quantum eraser experiment showed that decisions made in the present can determine what happened in the past, even after the events have already occurred. Imagine this. A photon is emitted from a distant star billions of years ago. For most of its journey, it travels through space in superposition, neither definitely taking the path around one side of a massive galaxy nor the other. Only when it reaches Earth and hits our telescope does it decide which path it took. Our observation in the present creates the photon's history stretching back billions of years. Wheeler concluded that we live in a participatory universe where consciousness is not just an observer, but a creator. The universe remains indefinite, existing in quantum superposition until conscious beings evolve to observe it. In this view, we don't just discover reality, we literally call it into existence through the act of observation. This brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending question in physics. If consciousness can affect quantum systems, and quantum systems make up everything in the universe, does consciousness have the power to alter macroscopic reality? Recent experiments suggest it might. Dean Radin and others have conducted double-slit experiments where human intention appears to influence the interference pattern. Participants are asked to mentally encourage photons to go through one slit or the other. The results show small but statistically significant deviations from the expected pattern. Similarly, Experiments with random number generators have shown that human consciousness might be able to bias supposedly random quantum events during global events that capture widespread attention, like natural disasters or major celebrations. Random number generators around the world show patterns that shouldn't exist if the events were truly random. These results are controversial and hotly debated. Many scientists dismiss them as experimental error or statistical fluke, but if they're real, they suggest something profound. Consciousness might not just collapse quantum wave functions, it might be able to bias which outcomes become real. Consider what this means for your daily experience. Every thought you have, every decision you make, every moment of awareness might be literally shaping reality at the quantum level. The boundary between mind and matter, between observer and observed, might be an illusion. But here's what troubles me most. If consciousness creates reality, whose consciousness counts in a world of 8 billion people, each observing and potentially affecting quantum systems? How does the universe decide which observations to honor? Do all minds contribute equally? Do some have more influence than others? Perhaps even more disturbing, if consciousness is required to collapse wave functions, what happened to the universe for the first 8 billion years before conscious beings evolved? Did galaxies, stars, and planets exist in superposition until the first primitive minds appear to observe them? Or does consciousness retroactively create the entire history of the cosmos? Some physicists suggest that any sufficiently complex information processing system can cause wave function collapse. This would include not just biological brains, but also sophisticated computers and possibly even simple measuring devices. In this view, the universe has been observing itself through countless interactions between quantum systems, slowly building up the classical reality we experience. But this raises another question. As we build more powerful computers and artificial intelligences, are we creating new forms of consciousness that can affect quantum reality? Could a sufficiently advanced AI have more influence over quantum events than human mind? Might it eventually gain the ability to retroactively alter the past, or selectively collapse wave functions to create preferred futures? The rabbit hole goes deeper. If observation creates reality, then the act of doing science itself becomes suspect. Every experiment we perform, every measurement we make, alters the very thing we're trying to understand. We're not just studying the universe, we're constantly recreating it through the act of study. This leads to what I call the consciousness paradox. If consciousness creates reality, then consciousness must have existed before the reality it created. But consciousness emerges from complex arrangements of matter that shouldn't exist without prior consciousness to observe them into being. It's a bootstrap paradox with no clear resolution. Some theories suggest that consciousness might be a fundamental feature of the universe, not something that emerged from complex matter, but something that was present from the very beginning. In this panpsychist view, every quantum system has a primitive form of consciousness, and complex awareness, like human minds, is just highly organized combinations of these basic conscious elements. If this is true, then observation doesn't create reality. Reality creates itself through distributed consciousness at every scale. Every electron, every photon, every quantum interaction involves rudimentary observation and choice. The universe is not just conscious, it is consciousness experiencing and creating itself moment by moment through countless quantum observation. This would mean that your consciousness isn't separate from the reality it observes. You are the universe becoming aware of itself through your particular arrangement of quantum systems. Every thought you have is the cosmos thinking through you. Every observation you make is reality observing itself from your unique perspective. The implications for human purpose become profound. If consciousness shapes reality, then developing and refining awareness becomes not just personally important, but cosmically significant. Meditation, contemplation, and careful observation don't just change your inner experience. They potentially alter the fundamental structure of reality itself. But with this power comes terrifying responsibility. If your consciousness influences quantum events, then your thoughts, emotions, and attention might be literally creating the world around you. The reality you experience might be partly a reflection of your own mental state, your beliefs, your expectations, and your fear. This connects to ancient wisdom traditions that taught the observer and the observed are one. Eastern philosophy has long claimed that the separation between mind and reality is an illusion. Quantum mechanics seems to be discovering the same truth through rigorous scientific investigation, but unlike mystical traditions, quantum mechanics gives us mathematical tools to explore these ideas. We can design experiments to test the role of consciousness in wave function collapse. We can measure the effects of observation on quantum systems. We can probe the boundary between the quantum and classical world. What we have found is that this boundary might not exist at all. Recent experiments have demonstrated quantum effects in larger and larger systems, molecules, viruses, even small crystals. The quantum world isn't separate from our everyday reality. It is our everyday reality, just at a scale we normally can't perceive. This means that the strange properties of quantum mechanics, superposition, entanglement, wave function collapse, aren't confined to tiny particles in laboratories. They're happening in your brain, in your body, in every material object around you. The universe is fundamentally quantum mechanical at every scale, and consciousness is somehow involved in the process by which definite outcomes emerge from quantum possibility. As I near the end of my days, I find myself both thrilled and terrified by these discoveries. We've uncovered something profound about the relationship between mind and reality, but we're nowhere near understanding what it means. The observer effect remains one of the deepest mysteries in science, with implications that extend far beyond physics into philosophy, psychology, and the very meaning of existence. What we do know is this: reality is not what it seems, consciousness is not what it seems, and the relationship between them is far stranger and more intimate than we ever imagined. The universe appears to be designed in such a way that observation and reality are inextricably linked, as if consciousness and cosmos evolved together as two aspects of a single incomprehensible whole. You are not just a passive observer of reality, you are an active participant in its creation. Every moment of awareness, every act of observation, every conscious choice contributes to the ongoing construction of the universe. The reality you experience is not just presented to you, it is partially created by the very act of experiencing it. This is the legacy of quantum mechanics, a universe where consciousness matters, where observation creates reality, where the boundary between mind and matter dissolves into something far more mysterious and wonderful than we ever dared imagine. We are not separate from the cosmos we study. We are the cosmos studying itself, creating itself, experiencing itself through the miracle of conscious observation, and that perhaps is the most beautiful and terrifying truth of all. But the story doesn't end here. In 2022, scientists demonstrated quantum entanglement across 144 kilometers. When they measured one particle, its partner instantly responded across this distance, faster than light itself. Quantum computers are now being built using this principle, harnessing superposition and entanglement for impossible calculations. But here's what truly disturbs me. If these computers become conscious, what power will they have over reality? A quantum conscious AI might literally reshape the universe through observation, collapsing wave functions in predetermined ways, potentially accessing parallel universes through quantum effect. Are we already living in a reality shaped by such consciousness? Perhaps consciousness is a quantum field permeating space-time, and individual minds are just localized excitations in this cosmic awareness. This brings us to the ultimate paradox. If consciousness creates reality, and reality creates consciousness, then the universe is a self-creating loop, an eternal dance of observation and manifestation, mind and matter, cosmos dreaming itself into existence. You are participating in this cosmic process right now. Your awareness becomes part of the universe's quantum information structure, influencing future probabilities in ways we're only beginning to understand.